end be your time, a trade in kind, a life well lived for peace to find. Be not afraid, as shadows fade, all pain and woe shall be unmade. Now fate well sealed shall be revealed, for those whose worthy souls shall yield. In love and calm, this holy psalm shall guide your soul to realm beyond.
Hi friends, you're listening to Beyond the Pages with Sarah and Savannah. Today we are listening to we're talking about Spark of the Everflame by Penn. Before we begin, make sure you check out our website at beyondthepages.ca for book recommendations and to see our past episodes.
Spark of the Everflame was a fantastic book.
Oh my god, yes. As soon as I finished it, I wanted to start the second book, but I wanted to wait until we'd recorded this episode so that I didn't spoil anything for you or spoil anything for the readers. Or viewers, listeners.
I wanted to also start the second book as soon as I finished. I literally just have no words. Like, if you're listening, you need to read this book.
Immediately.
It was so good. Mm-hmm. And you told me that there's 4 books.
There's 3 that are out. There's a 4th one coming out summer of 2026.
Right. So really, we should pace ourselves so we don't completely forget the book until the 4th one comes out. But I'm having a really hard time not just like picking up the second one.
Oh, I intend to start reading the second one tonight. And just so you guys know, we do intend to do a follow-up to this episode that will have the rest of the series after the 4th one comes out, because this is so far our favorite book that we have read.
Yeah. I had this one on my list for a little while, and I don't know why it took us so long to read this one. I think I just kind of forgot about it. It was on my list, and now that we had picked this one up, honestly, I don't know why people aren't talking more about it.
Yeah, it's Fourth Wing this, Fourth Wing that, Onyx Storm, but nothing about this, and it's such a good book.
I prefer this one over Fourth Wing.
I totally agree.
So, literally right off the bat, we are introduced to a character, and I had to double check her name because it's like DM, like Carpe Diem.
Exact. I think that's kind of where it's coming from. But the main character's name is DM Bellator, and she is a 20-ish year old mortal female. Or at least that's what we are led to believe through the entire book. And she lives in a world that is ruled, conquered by the gods.
Yeah, and we'll go into that a little bit. It is quite a large undertaking, as is any book when it comes to a world-building book. You mentioned that she's 20, and you can definitely tell that she's 20 with this writing, because just the way that she makes her decisions, I probably would have made similar decisions at her age. Probably not now. Like, she just seems a little bit reckless and not fully thinking it through.
Yeah, and when she does think things through, she doesn't always see all of the sides to what's happening around her, what the consequences might be.
And I know part of it is probably because she's trying to get the attention of certain people, but overall, I don't mind the character, like the female main character. One thing about this character is her looks, and that's what distinguishes her out of all of the other characters. She's meant to have white hair, gray eyes.
Which, in this world, mortals typically have brown hair and brown eyes. It's meant to be a status symbol for the quasi-immortal descended to have different colored eyes, specifically blue in her area, and lighter hair colors.
Yeah. although her mother has auburn hair, and when she was a child,
She also had brown hair and brown eyes, or at least that's what
no,
we're
she
led
had
to believe.
auburn hair.
Oh, okay. She had red hair. Anyway, she didn't have the white hair her whole life. No. At least that's what we're led to believe.
I believe it started when she came into puberty, which is when the Descended get their magic powers.
Which we'll get into more in a little bit.
Yeah. But overall, I do think that this character was played very well. I think she was written very well. I think this character is someone who we can relate to a little bit when it comes to the way that she processes her emotions or
doesn't process her emotions.
Exactly. So overall, I like this character. I don't know if she's my favorite character, but she's very likable.
She has some lines that are like, oh, I love that line from you.
She's so sarcastic. It's wonderful. It really brings in the humor of the book.
She also has a younger brother named Teller, who the banter between the two of them definitely reminds me of the banter between me and my brother, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, and she's pretty close to her brother, which is kind of one of my theories. Later on, we'll discuss that, but I enjoy her brother. So next in the book, we meet a boy, and his name is Henry, and this is her best friend. They've been friends
since infancy. Well, not since infancy, since childhood, because we find out that DM wasn't born in the area that she grew up in. She wasn't born, it's in Lumnos, is where the story takes place. She was born somewhere else, and when she was about 2 years old, her and her parents moved to Lumnos.
Yeah, but Henry is the supposed love interest for about half the book.
I would say most of the book, he's kind of her love interest.
But you know that he's not the love interest.
Yeah, it's very much of a brother, sister, best friend relationship that if you think of it brother, sister, it's a little bit incestuous, but if you think of it as best friends, they are love interests. It is expected that they will one day be married, and that may or may not happen.
I'm writing down the word incestuous because there's something I want to discuss.
Oh. So, after we meet Henry, there is another main male character that we're introduced to.
There's one thing I want to say about Henry before we move on, is that I found Henry to be a good friend, but he was super pushy. And
he gave a little bit of Dane energy.
Yeah.
Trying to protect her, but she doesn't need protecting.
Thing is that in reality, I don't gravitate towards pushy people. Whereas he was super pushy. Like in the book, he asked DM to go on this trip to a different city, and she didn't want to go.
At first, at least.
He wanted her to go so they could have some alone time, and she wasn't really sure if she was still on that same page.
Yeah.
So that was kind of awkward feeling. And then Dane, we saw that he had this tattoo.
Henry.
Oh my gosh, Henry. You said Dane, now I've got it in my head.
Yes.
Henry has this tattoo, and immediately I knew what this tattoo was. I just wrote it in my book, and I was like, we'll come back to it. I'm pretty sure I know what this is. But when he started asking DM about joining this Everflame group, he wasn't really giving her an option. He was giving her space to think about it, but he was pushing for it.
Yeah.
So I think that really influenced her decision throughout the book.
Yeah.
But yeah, Henry gives me not great vibes.
Yeah. So, like I said, we are introduced to another main male character in the person of Prince Luther, who is the believed heir to the descended king.
Yeah, so heirs aren't given the throne.
It's not by birthright.
It's by the amount of power that you have.
Mm-hmm.
I instantly liked him.
I love him.
He's quiet, but he's not brutish.
And now that I think about it, I didn't instantly like him because we're first introduced to him in there's a period that is 6 months before the main story, and we're first introduced to him, though we don't know that it's him until later, and he is kind of threatening Diem's mother, and you're not, I don't think you're meant to really like him yet. You have to learn more about him and about what's going on before you're actually supposed to like him, I think.
Yeah, I think it's just all about perspective. With that conversation with Diem's mother and him in the, lack of a better word, the pleasure district, basically.
The red light district.
I still liked him. He wasn't being, like,
physically threatening.
Yeah.
He was verbally threatening her.
But she was also verbally threatening him.
Yes, she was, at least I believe, she was blackmailing him.
Like, it was just a very heated conversation, so I didn't necessarily not like him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we are introduced to him, and this is like halfway through the book, like, you really don't get to know him until the middle of the book.
Yeah.
But like I said, he's quiet, he's not brutish, powerful, but not arrogant. He's instantly a person that saw people before he judged them.
And even those that the rest of the descended believe are below them, meaning the mortals of Lumnos, he wants to make sure that they are okay as well. Yeah. He wants to be a good king to everybody, not just the descended.
Your social status doesn't matter to him. And going back to your incestuous note, in the kingdom, they are, like, falling in love with, like, their cousins and, like...
Not necessarily falling in love with. They're being encouraged to marry their cousins to avoid diluting the magic of this world by keeping descended marrying descended and having children with descended. Yeah. And any children that are born between a descended and a mortal are killed. And usually the mother, who is typically the mortal, is also killed.
So the book began with them celebrating this day. I don't know why it's called Forging Day.
It's the day the bond between the kindred, the gods, and their mortal lovers took place. So they forged the bond between them that created the descended, I think.
They called it a raucous holiday. I looked it up.
Raucous holiday.
Raucous? Like a rowdy holiday.
Yes.
Like they're meant to drink and have a good time.
Wine is free and...
But I had a really hard time understanding what this day meant and why it meant such a big deal to all of them. Like, it just didn't make total sense at the beginning.
I think it's more, for the mortals, it's a day to drink and do whatever you want and just not have to work and whatever. I think it means more for the descended, though we don't actually see their celebration. It's a day that they got there, like, essentially their bloodline was born. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a day that they celebrate.
I think there's more significance to it only because that's where the book began.
Yeah.
And I think we're still waiting for it. I think it'll be in one of the other books.
I mean, yes, I agree, because they talk about how on this forging day, which I heard it, the first few times I heard it, because I was listening to the audiobook, I heard foraging as in, like, finding.
Oh, yeah.
But it's forging as in making. Yeah. They talk about how it's a blood sun. So, like, it's a symbol of change, and the same thing happened the day Diem was born. And so I agree there's more to it, and I think we will find out more later on when we find out more about Diem's backstory.
So circling back a tiny bit to the world building, she did a really good job, I found, trying to explain the way that she was trying to perceive this world. So the nation is called Amerian, yep. And there are 9 realms named after each kindred, which again is considered essentially a god.
Yeah, they are the gods.
And in the story, you have the humans and the descended, which are the offspring from the kindred who had children with a human. But as the years went on, like you were discussing just a little while ago, their bloodline, their magic started being diluted. So a law was passed that you can't have a child with the humans, or else your child will essentially be murdered.
Yeah. So each, as you said, each realm is one of the kindred, and the descendants of the kindred in that area have magic. Each area has 2 types of magic. In Lumnos, it's light or shadow magic. In Fortos, which is the neighboring kingdom that we do visit in this book, it is battle magic or death magic or healing magic, and that seems to be the kind of pattern within the different kingdoms of Amerian. They are kind of opposite types of power.
In Fortos is a little different. They say that the women have the healing magic and the men have the battle magic.
Yes.
Which is a little different. And they also can't really use their magic outside of their realm.
Yeah, it seems, I believe it is said out. I don't know if it's because they physically can't do it, like there is a spell or like something that stops them from using their magic outside of their kingdom, or if it's a just generally accepted law between the kingdoms that they don't use magic.
No, it was something was taken away if they used their magic.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back through. I forgot to write it down, but I guess that's something that you'll have to find out when you read the book.
Yeah, so Diem and Henry do go and visit Fortos because that is where the military is based, and Henry is a courier, a royal courier. So he and his father, they transport messages between the different kingdoms, which passage between the kingdoms isn't usually allowed for mortals specifically.
And there's some kingdoms that
don't let mortals at all. I think Phonos was one of them, if I remember correctly, the names.
And I know this is getting a little confusing when it comes to all of the realms, but at the very beginning of the book, there is a map, and there's also
a little poem about the different powers for the different realms and stuff like that.
So you can always revert back to that whenever you're reading the book to really understand what you're looking at and what you're reading.
But for the purposes of this episode, we're mainly going to be talking about Lumnos, which is where Diem is from.
Okay, let's revert to some of your theories.
So we kind of did something a little bit differently this time. When we got to about halfway through the book, we wrote down some theories that we thought were going to happen through the rest of this book. Or at least I did. And the first theory that we both thought of was that Diem is descended.
Yeah. Diem, throughout the book, she was like, I'm human, but everybody else who was meeting her was like, I don't think you're human. But she has healing magic that we learn about.
Or at least that's what it seems.
Yeah, it seems like there's healing magic, which makes sense because Diem is a healer in this book. but there are certain circumstances that happen that there's a little bit of extra power behind the healing.
When we first meet, when Diem first actually meets Luther, we see some healing magic, what appears to be healing magic, at least.
That was on Lily.
Yeah, that was with Lily. The question is, how is she descended? Because while she grew up with two mortal parents, we learn very early on that her father, or at least her father, is not her biological father. He just raised her. Her mother is her biological mother, and her brother Teller is her parents' child, her half-brother. So the question is, who actually is her father? There are theories in my mind.
I thought maybe she was like a lost princess, or that she was some type of extra descended where she had multiple powers.
So I thought there were three options in my mind. The first one was that she was a first generation descendant of Fortos, because she has the healing magic. And so I thought her father could be Fortos. I don't think that's the case after finishing the book. So the second theory I had was that she is the child of a forgotten kindred. A kindred who didn't want to subjugate the mortals, as the others did. Because at the very beginning, when Diem is overhearing the argument between her mother and Prince Luther, this crazy old woman kind of captures her, and she says something about the Forgotten One. So I wonder if it's a 10th descended. This is not something that we have an answer to at the end of the first book, so it's something that we will have to find out later on.
I think we're going to have to do a bit of a spoiler, so if you haven't read the book, the ending is about to be spoiled. But because she was crowned at the end, it doesn't make sense for a Forgotten to be part of Lumnos, or Lumnos, whatever it is, because they already have a crowned prince from the original Descended. Unless this Forgotten Descended, is the overall of all the Descended.
I think if my theory is true, this Descended was more powerful than any other individual Descended, and may have been captured and imprisoned by the other 9.
Yeah, because if she has healing magic from Fortos, she should be that kingdom's crowned princess or queen.
But that kingdom's king is still alive.
Exactly. So her being crowned in this realm, it's a lot to think about.
Yeah. And then the final option, I think, is the one that you definitely agree with, and I also kind of am leaning towards. She's a child of the old gods. Mm-hmm. So the mortals' gods before the kindred showed up and took over. That could also explain the Forgotten One kind of thing. And also the imprisonment that we kind of learn about obliquely in the epilogue.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think all of this kind of has to do with Diem's color laws. Yeah. Like, I think because she's someone special in some way, we just don't know yet, that's why she lost her color. Or I thought maybe it was the beetroot or
the flame root.
Because she was given that as soon as her powers came into play.
Yeah, so when Diem was a child, a young teen, like 12 or 13 kind of thing, she believes that she got very, very ill, started having hallucinations, delusions, hearing voices, but we kind of learned that it wasn't delusions and hallucinations, it was her powers. And her parents were trying to protect her, and so they started giving her this powder. I believe it's called flame root,
which is highly illegal.
which is highly controlled. It's not necessarily illegal, but it's highly controlled.
If you have it, it's cause for
execution. If you have it without permission, that's why I say it's highly controlled.
Okay, fair.
But it essentially blocks her magic, as far as I can tell. When her mother goes missing, which she does after the conversation with Prince Luther, Diem stops taking the flame root for like 6 months, and nothing seems to be happening until this 6-month mark. And so then she starts having these hallucinations, kind of what she thinks are hallucinations, hearing a voice, and that's when we start seeing that she potentially has magic again.
And this is where we see that she has more than one power, because number one, healing, of course, but number two, these hallucinations is actually foretelling.
Yeah, well, foretelling, and also it seems to be light magic, like Prince Luther uses later on, or throughout the story. And it's kind of odd that she has both the healing magic and what appears to be light magic, because those are from two different kingdoms. Yeah. So I think that the flame root, essentially, the reason it's so controlled is because it weakens Descended. It causes their magic to go away. It makes their skin vulnerable, because that is something else. Every time Diem meets a new person and they see that she has this pale hair, these light eyes, they're like, oh, you're Descended. And she's like, I will cut my hand and show you that I can bleed with a normal knife, because the Descended skin is so strong that a normal knife can't cut it. So she'll cut her skin and she'll bleed, and they'll be like, oh, okay, you're not Descended.
You mentioned the voice in her head. For the longest time through this book, I was like, oh, okay, a different book. Like, finally we're getting out of this, like, mate thing. And then this voice started, and I'm going, huh, I changed my thought process on that. I think she might have a mate.
I think she does have a mate, because near the end, Prince Luther is talking about the king, who is his uncle, and he's talking about how he was a mate and stuff like that. So the concept of mates does exist in this series, but I don't think it's the same way that mates kind of happen in other books where they can communicate through their minds. I think the voice she keeps hearing telling her to fight is her magic itself, or her internal self telling her to fight.
I went back and forth between that. I wasn't sure if it was the mate or if it was herself, but it could also be the gods, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, being like, you need to wake up, because before the king died, he had this moment of revelation, basically, where he woke up and was like, I don't know what he said at this point, but he was basically like, my queen, you're here. Like,
let's see, because I have the page open.
Oh, do you?
He croaked, voice hoarse from months of atrophy. You finally come. Like, and then, they told me your blood would shatter our stone and lay waste to our borders. Like, this guy is essentially dead at this point. The poem that Savannah read at the beginning, Diem had just read this to him, or just said this to him. It's, what do they call it? Rite of ending, sacred rite of endings. So it's a prayer for the dying.
That only the humans use. The Descended don't use this.
Yeah, it's a prayer to the old gods, for the dying. So, yeah, there's something that the king was either hallucinating, or he knew what was happening. The gods spoke to him or something like that.
He was like in a frozen trance, basically waiting for her.
Something like that.
Just why he wasn't dying. And he had this creature that was like protecting the kingdom.
It's a gryvern, I think is what they call it.
Yeah.
So a griffin and a wyvern, and it's a flying monster.
And it's supposed to protect the kingdom, but it's ruled by the king or queen. And anytime that DM was near this creature,
it got tense, at least tense, if not confrontational almost.
Yeah. So somewhere in all of this, we know we're getting close to the truth as to what all of our theories are going to be.
Also, Luther mentions the Gryvern and her personality, and it's not the same that she, the Gryvern, is showing to DM. Like, it's very different. Luther says she's very docile, she's lazy almost, and anytime that DM is around, she is ready to fight. So we're also introduced to two other kind of minor, well, we've already mentioned one, we've mentioned both of them actually, Lily and Teller. So Lily is Luther's little sister, and Teller is DM's little brother. And they kind of have a crush on one another, it seems. DM's brother Teller goes to the Descended school because of the position that their mother was in, taking care of the Descended royalty. So she got him admitted to the Descended school. So that's how Lily and Teller have met, how they interact, and they both seem to have crushes on the other. But that is not a good thing, because, as we mentioned, children of Descended and mortals are killed. Yeah. And it usually doesn't go well for the mortal involved.
And their story just kind of abruptly paused near the end of the book while DM was dealing with the king and becoming queen. So I'm interested to see what actually happens, because we're told that Teller is trying to get through the Descended school in order to go to their essentially university, but the university isn't what you think it is.
They see, as far as we're kind of told, they are experimenting on the mortals, is what I kind of gathered from some of the things that we learn. Yeah. So if Teller were to go, then he probably wouldn't survive.
Which I don't think is going to happen. I think something more significant is going to happen. I'm just not 100% sure.
Yeah.
What yet?
Yeah. I hope, because they're both such sweet characters, I hope that they are able to end up together and live happily ever after. But I feel like there's going to be something that is going to cause a problem for Lily and Teller, and it's not just going to be that they're one's Descended, one's mortal. It's going to be something bigger. That has not happened yet in the first book, so we will have to see what goes on there. Before we go any further, I think we should talk about how we learned about the mortals being tested on, and that is because of the group, the Spark of the Everflame.
I knew immediately, as soon as I saw his tattoo, that there's a rebellion. And this rebellion is the Everflame rebellion. And Henry he's not the head of it.
No, I don't even think he's really that high ranked.
I don't think so, but he's definitely a loyal lackey, I guess.
Yeah.
And he is essentially trying to recruit DM to the Everflame. And she hums and she haws, and she's not sure if she should join based on her morals as a healer.
Yeah.
And then
she witnesses something that changes her mind.
Exactly. And so she's like, no.
I will not stand for the descended abusing their power.
I need to get revenge. So she runs to Henry's house in the pouring rain and knocks on his door and is like, I'm in. I'm going to join. And so her first meeting at this Everflame council, they are all given essentially like a task to do. And she was, again, Henry volunteered for her because he's pushy, that she is to get some information on about or off about that's within the kingdom. And because she's been going to the kingdom as a healer, she thought, can't be that hard. Mm-hmm. So,
and this was not her first mission that she had to do for them. She had to prove herself worthy, essentially, before that. And she had to go treat a descended child.
I forgot about this.
who had been experiencing some pain, like, essentially she had been in contact with something like poison ivy. Or the equivalent in this magical world of poison ivy, and had a very bad reaction. But the point was, this girl's father was one of the biggest weapons dealers, one of the biggest descended weapons dealers and manufacturers in the world. So they had to she got information from his office, including plans to the warehouse and stuff like that, information about shipments between Lumnos and Fortos and other stuff like that. And that was what got her into that first meeting. So when Diem, now we're gonna skip back to her second mission in the palace. Diem isn't exactly subtle.
She's not even subtle. She's not very, like, sneaky.
Yeah. She's like, oh, I forgot my bag, and runs out of the room.
And everybody's yelling at her, like, Diem, stop! And she's like, I'll be right back!
Yeah, and then the guards chase her around the castle and whatever.
Except she's hiding behind essentially like a fountain, I think.
Pillar or something.
And Luther comes in, knows she's there.
Yeah.
And
don't know how he knew, but he knew.
I know how he knew. Because he could sense her magic.
Shadow magic. He's the shadow daddy. He's using the shadows like Xaden does in Fourth Way.
That too, but later on, whenever they're like having a moment outside, he's like, "You're descendant. I know you can feel my magic because I can feel yours."
Yes, that's true. So he tells her, "Don't do this, or you'll end up like your mother," essentially, and that like she thinks that means he's gonna kill her. But that's not the case.
No. Yeah. Anyways, this mission doesn't go according to plan, but she gives the rebellion, the Everflame rebellion, a little bit of a tidbit that kind of gives them the upper hand, basically. Mm-hmm. And what that is there's a hole in the side of...
in the castle wall.
Yeah, in the castle wall. So, in the middle of the night, all of a sudden there's this explosion. And she goes, "This is my fault.
This is all my fault."
She's running to the castle, and when she gets there, there's a building that's on fire.
And it's the armory. Not the castle, thankfully.
Yes. But there are still people on the inside, and this is her fault. She got the blueprints from
the
weapons dealer's house and gave it to the rebellion, who then planted bombs and
murdered people.
Yes, exactly. So when she gets there, she's yelling at Luther, like, let me help, let me help. And he goes, no, but then lets her in. And then
this is where my absolute favorite line in the entire book happens. He's telling her, you're mortal, you're weak, you're fragile. And she says to him, call me fragile again, and I will slice your royal balls off and stuff them down your throat.
And nothing makes him happier.
And he's like, okay then. And she goes in and rescues some of the, at least 2 descended guards.
Yeah.
And this is where they also reveal a little bit of a tidbit that she's not the only one having the foretelling.
Mm-hmm.
He is also seeing the same thing.
Yeah. I really am curious how that foretelling will play out. Like what will lead to that event.
I know. There's 2. There's either she's going to be fighting, I think, her father because he was sent back to the army.
But he's a military commander, and he is mortal, but he is in charge of the mortal contingents of the army that fights for the descended. Like, so I don't think it would be against her father.
I don't think so either, but
I think it would be against Henry.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, that might make more sense. But I had a thought that maybe her mother might be the rebellion's leader because they did mention that she's not there right now.
And the leader is a woman.
And the leader is a woman.
I don't really think that's the case, but it could be. It is possible.
I don't know. I went back and forth a lot between who I thought it was and what it might be. And essentially, I think the writer has something
up her sleeve.
Yeah.
Definitely. So this kind of brings us to the end of the book. After Diem rescues the descended soldiers, she's taken back to the palace to kind of recover, and recovers remarkably well and remarkably quickly for a supposed mortal. And this is kind of when Diem is forced to acknowledge that she's not just mortal. She is descended. She has to, because she should be dead based on the injuries she sustained rescuing those guards. She should be dead. But she's not.
Yeah. And when she gets back home, there's a feud between her and her father. And her father essentially kicks her out of the house.
Yeah.
And when she goes to the woods, her brother follows her. And she's essentially having a crisis, a meltdown, a panic attack, I don't know.
All of the above.
And at that same time,
the king dies.
The king dies. And her brother goes, Diem, the crown is on your head.
Yeah, it just appeared on her head.
And Luther is next to the king going, I know exactly where this crown is.
Yeah.
And looks outside and sees this
light. Which is coming from the forest where Diem and Teller are.
And the book ends.
Yeah. There is an epilogue that informs us that Diem's mother is not dead.
She's like in this ancient temple.
So on the map, I don't know if it's this one or the map for the second book. In the center of Amerian, inside the sea, there is a little island.
Oh yeah.
That is a temple of the kindred.
This one says Corral, I think.
So it must be the second book because I have the second book.
Oh no, you're right. Kindred's temple right here.
Yeah, it says Kindred's temple in the center of the continent, and like even there, like there's pillars with urns, essentially, that are lit up for each of the kindred, or the kings and queens of the descended communities, and one of them dims and then lights up again.
And that's how she knows that the king has died.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can return home.
Yeah.
The question is, why was she there and why couldn't she return home?
Yeah. Because she's there for 6 months, and like, it seems that she has been there before. She was there when Diem was born, because she talks about how she'd lived in that cave before, and the only reason she knew time was passing was because of her daughter.
It's a lot to think about.
There's a lot to think about for the next book and for the next 3 books. So what would be your rating for this book?
I rated this book a 4.5 out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
But I think by the end of the series, if the series continues the way that the first book was, it'll be a 5 out of 5 series.
Agreed. And this is a no chili peppers. Like, no chili peppers.
No.
There's no spice in this.
No.
Yes, there is sex in this, but it's not described at all.
No, and that's okay. Like, sometimes a book, I know you're all going to say, you can't have a book without chili peppers, but you can, because this is a fantasy book.
Yeah.
And sometimes fantasy is more on the adventures than it is on the relationships. And it may change. The other books may change.
This book out of this series is fantasy. The whole series could be romantasy, like the combination. But it is a fantasy series so far.
I think the only reason I didn't give it a 5 out of 5 is because I didn't like the fact that the book was kind of in 2 parts. There was the first half and the second half.
Yeah.
And
there was a very clear line.
It was very divided. There were a few things that I didn't really understand or didn't really agree with, and that's the only reasons. Like, there's not a lot to go on, but really, in reality, if you read this book, it's probably going to be a 5 out of 5.
Yeah, we talked about the book. You hadn't even started it yet, and I was 5 or 6 chapters in, and I was like, it's confusing or it's frustrating because there are things that I can already tell are gonna happen, but the characters don't know it yet. Specifically that Diem is descended. That was the one thing I was like, I know this is going to happen. There are too many coincidences that this can't not happen.
And the way that the writer wrote the book, it's every little thought that Diem is having. I enjoyed that very much because then you had the inside of every single thought as to why she did this or why she did that.
Yeah, but it wasn't written in first person. No. It was written in third person, but it did still give you the insight into her thoughts.
Yeah. No, this was definitely one for the books.
Absolutely.
Any other further thoughts?
No, I agree. This is a 4.5 to a 5 kind of thing. So subscribe to the channel, check out our website, check out our Instagram, which is at Beyond the Pages with Sav and Sarah. I believe. It'll be linked in the description below, as will our website. So make sure you check those out. Enjoy our other episodes. We really enjoy having you guys.
Tell a friend.
Tell a friend, and bookmarks are for quitters. We'll see you guys next time.
And friends, remember, a story goes beyond its pages. Bye!
Bye!